Okay, at number 5 on my list, 5 was difficult to pick because there were so many good MMOs that I could probably slide into the 5th spot. Ion was a game that I played a lot and really liked. I really liked Ion. You'll notice that there's quite a few NC Soft games on my list here, guys, which is probably a shock to a lot of people because a lot of people probably don't like NC Soft games. But they were the ones that really introduced me to the genre, and I really have an affinity towards some of the mechanics, some of the hardcore aspects of those games. I actually, because of that, was my first introduction. Well, it made me feel more like Dungeons and Dragons. I'm a Dungeons and Dragons kid. You know, I grew up in the 80s. And to me, a good dungeon master is going to make leveling and make the journey challenging and difficult, and actually make it a journey. And that's the whole part, and this whole experience of playing these games to me is going to a fantastic open world where it is difficult and you progress slowly over time, not quickly, slowly. And Black Desert's another one of those games that I really liked that had kind of when it first came out, most of these games on this list, if I were to play them today, wouldn't be on this list because they're not the same games. This game, as it was when it started, release day one, when I was there playing it, was a great game. Had a very slow leveling experience, a very grindy leveling experience. The depth of the crafting system in this game is like nothing I've ever seen. It's unbelievable. You can build. You can go in and have your own house and put your own cooking utensils in there and your own alchemy shop and craft different things. But you had to go out and get all these things, and you could actually hire workers to do work for you. You could have workers you could have the game. You could be logged into the game and be watching TV. And have NPCs that you hired in the game to go and chop down trees, to go and collect, ore for you. You could create trade packs and actually walk from city to city, trading, so that you're making money trading. You could capture horses and lasso them, and go through that mini game of actually trying to capture a horse, and then train your horses, then crossbreed your horses and become a horse trader. You could build your own ships. You could build your own ships, launch them on the open sea, and go sailing. And you could go fishing on islands that you find. You can go learn how to harpoon and try to kill whales. You could go into huge, massive PvP battles over the loot of those whales that you killed. You could go into massive open world PvP battles over areas, over regions, over just guild versus guild. The list goes on and on, but the two things that I haven't even mentioned yet are the best aspects of Black Desert are the combat. The combat is fantastic and wonderful and very free-flowing, especially with certain classes. Like here I'm playing the Sorcerer, so it's just a very fluid, beautiful class to play, and very dangerous in PvP, and one of the most powerful classes in the game, if not the most powerful class in the game, as far as she can just drop a bomb on a whole group of people and really annihilate a lot of people pretty quickly. And also the world itself. The world is entirely open world. It's entirely beautiful and gorgeous and expansive, and everything you see in the world you can pretty much try to travel to. There's nothing that's really preventing you from traveling anywhere in the world, and that's always a big key for me. Games need to be open world, and so Black Desert offers a lot. A lot of people don't like Black Desert. They don't like the grind. They don't like the pay to win, because it is kind of pay to win to some degree. But I never played games to be like the best. I played them to enjoy the game and to enjoy the experience of what the world had to offer. And Black Desert is my number 5. It could easily have gone higher, but the other games that are going to be higher than Black Desert, they're almost more for nostalgia reasons. You know, it really, when I thought about this list, it was more of like, what are my top 5 based on the experiences I had in them when I had them? So, Black Desert is number 5 for me. So I have to say that my 4th favorite MMO would have to be Guild Wars 2, and I think Guild Wars 2 was pretty innovative in certain areas, and obviously, like Lexer said, Warhammer Online kind of created the dynamic events, but Guild Wars 2 really advertised them, and it became more of a recognizable thing. Guild Wars 2 had probably my favorite map of any MMO, probably has my favorite mini-map of any MMO, probably has my favorite art style, like stylized art of any MMO. It also has just a really enjoyable story and leveling experience. The leveling experience in Guild Wars 2 is very enjoyable, and it feels very accessible. It feels very like you don't feel any pressure, and it feels like you can just move through maps and just kind of do what you want to do. And there's other people that will just kind of join your party and help you and leave your party. And, because of the dynamic events, you'll just be moving along, and people just kind of come in and help and leave. And it's just always there's that map I was talking about. And it's just a really fun experience, and the ability to swap weapon sets and have a lot of variety with, maybe 4 or 5 different types of weapons that you can use. That changes out the skills that you have access to make it really just very flexible combat system. It's kind of a hybrid action / tab targeting system, but it works really well. It's very smooth. I mean, there's a lot of things about Guild Wars 2 I could complain about, but I'm not going to go through that in this video. I'm just saying that this is definitely probably number 4 on my list, and it's one of those MMOs that's just gorgeous. I would say the level design is my favorite level design of any MMO. When you look at the actual worlds that you're moving through, it's completely open world, and that has to be something there. That, I mean, no MMO on this list is going to not be open world. I have to have it completely. But look at this level. I mean, look at how beautiful the world of Guild Wars 2 is, and there's just so many inventive like levels where you're moving up and down through ships that have crashed in the ocean. And yeah, I could say that other MMOs have done that, but Guild Wars 2 does it consistently, like over and over again. You move from zone to zone, and you just see really well thought out levels, well constructed. Also, the underwater combat in Guild Wars 2 is number 1. There is no better underwater combat system in an MMO than Guild Wars 2. And it's actually quite enjoyable and quite fun. The world bosses that are just out there that you can pick up and try to fight are very difficult. Again, the map, being able to like pin things on the map and link those locations into the chat windows to say, hey, can anybody come and help me on this location? And people can click the link, and it just comes up on the map and says, hey, let's go here. And so really the community is really nice. People are very friendly, and I think the way the game was designed, it really lends itself to being very cooperative. I don't want to go, like I said, I'm not going to talk about the bad things, but definitely Guild Wars 2 is a great game, and it comes in at number 4 on my list. All right, my number 3 favorite MMO of all time would have to be Tera, and I think some people might be surprised by my list, maybe not. It's interesting to look at other people's lists, look at mine, because mine is, a lot of the games are a little bit newer. A lot of the games do have more action-based combat, which I definitely think is a theme for me. I do enjoy games that have a more action type of combat system. I also enjoy games that have a little bit more difficulty. And if you look at Tera, I played in all the closed betas. I played in all the open betas. And Tera at that time was a really, really good game. It had really challenging content. These BAM encounters, like the one you see here on the screen here where I'm fighting a crab, were actually very challenging. You could easily get one shot by this monster here if you didn't know what you were doing. And the playing like a healer class, for example, it was the Holy Trinity. Doing the dungeons were very challenging because the characters had to perform their roles very well, and a healer couldn't just like stand back and tab target heal. They had to actually do damage as well, and they also had to move, because when the BAMs did their big moves, they could kill the healer. He could one-shot the healer, and so the healers had to actually always be aware of not only doing damage but moving around so they're not getting hit, and also trying to heal. And the healers did have a lock-on heal, but they also had another heal, which was an area heal, which was even more important than their lock-on heal, because it could heal multiple people at once. So they would target a certain spot on the ground and throw a heal to that spot. And if the people they were trying to heal were standing in that circle, they would get healed, but if they weren't, they wouldn't. And so that caused a lot of problems, because the bosses would do big maneuvers that would land in that area, and if the person wanted to get a heal, they were going to get hit by the boss. So a lot of times characters would dodge or move out of that area, and then the heal wouldn't land. So being a healer took a lot of timing and a lot of skill. And I thought that made the healer class way more enjoyable to play than a lot of other MMOs. The crafting in this game wasn't as big as a lot of the other games, and so I would say the crafting was okay, but it wasn't by any means one of my favorite crafting systems. The reason I love Tera so much was they advertised the game as true action combat, and it really was. Tera was probably my favorite combat system of any MMO, because it really was. It really did take skill. You really did have to know what you're doing, and all the abilities were situational. This music's getting really loud. But all the abilities were situational. You'd never had the same rotations. I mean, you had some of the rotations that would be similar, but when a boss activated one of its big moves, they were random. They were RNG based. They weren't, so you never knew what was going to happen. So you could be in the middle of the rotation, the boss would execute a certain move, and you had to break out of maybe an animation and do something completely different. So you always had to be on your toes, and that just made, to me, the boss fights, the PvE and the PvP so much more enjoyable. I really enjoyed this game immensely, especially I would say the first couple weeks of Tera that I ever played was some of the best experiences I ever had in MMO. And the art style also was really good. The worlds weren't as massive as something like Black Desert, but they were still very large worlds, and like I said, the art was very nice, which was impressive, because I think this is Unreal Engine 3. So it was impressive they were able to create something that looked this good in Unreal Engine 3. And it also says that, being able to create something like that in an Unreal Engine 3 that's an MMO is pretty impressive as well. But anyways, Tera is definitely my number 3 on this list. My number two favorite MMO of all time is probably, well, not probably, it is Lineage 2, and a lot of people probably be surprised by that. But it really was my first MMORPG I ever played, my first true MMO, and it came out in 2004, I believe. It might have been 2003. I played in the Korean beta, I played in the Thai beta, I played on the release. I was really blown away by the fact that you could play this massively open, because it was a true massive open world. Lineage 2 has a huge open world. And you didn't see too many MMOs back then, or at least too many games that had this kind of a massive open world where you took you 45 minutes just to walk from one side of the map, maybe to the other side of the map, you know? And there was a lot of hardcore PvP. There was a big, heavy grind, which, again, I liked that. That was something I kind of was used to from playing Dungeons & Dragons, because the way we played Dungeons & Dragons, it was a very slow process. The GM was a very hardcore GM that made you work for what you got. And so going into Lineage 2 felt like it was just an extension of Dungeons & Dragons to me, leveling up a sorcerer. I was playing a spell howler, and learning how to take down multiple monsters at once was difficult, because in Lineage 2, it's not an easy game. The fastest person in the original game when it came out to reach top level was 6 months. So it was a grind, and Lineage 2 was a dangerous game. Like, when you went into certain buildings, like if you accidentally aggroed maybe 3 mobs, you could die very quickly. So there was no casualness to it, really. Like, when the game first came out, you had to be aware of where you were, what you were doing, you had to be ready to rotate your spells in the right order, because if you screwed up, it could be as simple as just messing up your spell rotation a couple times, and that could lead to your death. So it was a very challenging game. There was also a really cool crafting system in that you couldn't get all the regions you needed to craft. You actually had to have an artisan class, which is a type of class that can loot certain items for monsters when they kill them. And without an artisan, you couldn't craft, really. I mean, you had to either create an alt that was an artisan, or you had to have a friend who was an artisan. And you can see the shops here on the screen, these private stores. So when you wanted to sell something, you would literally set up a private shop with a little billboard here that says "private store, sell," and I'm selling this and this. And then you would sit down, and it would set up the shop. So when you were away from the game, you would still be logged into your game, and your character would be there trying to sell stuff to people in the world, which I thought was kind of an interesting way to do it. And there was a lot of really popular PvP system, I would like to say. There were a lot of gankers. There was rules in place that prevent people from griefing too much, but there was quite a bit of griefing. I was definitely a hardcore game. Like I said, the crafting was good. The bosses were really big, and there were big castle sieges that were massive events that were really cool. The problem with the castle sieges, though, is because of the client, because this game was so old, there was a lot of optimization issues with that many people on the screen at a time, but it still was a pretty impressive event to see. You could actually get a dragon egg, hatch a dragon little pet, and you could feed him and take him along with you to fight. And it was really difficult to raise your dragon, but you could eventually evolve him into a strider, which is like a dragon that you could ride around. And if you were super lucky, eventually you could raise him up to be a full-fledged dragon. And I guess certain people that were certain leaders of certain guilds and certain, they were like the leader of a town, would actually be able to fly their dragon. I honestly never saw anyone fly a dragon in Lineage 2, but there was some really cool stuff that was in the game. And I just have a lot of nostalgia, and just looking at the cities here. I mean, I know the graphics don't look that great, but keep in mind this came out in 2003. Was really a enjoyable experience, and it was the game that taught me about MMOs and what MMOs were all about. And I just had a blast. I loved this game to death when it came out, and I only played this game for about probably 6 months before another game that came out that pulled my attention away from this game, and we'll talk about that game next. For me, the number one game, I think it's by no surprise to anybody, has to be World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft brought together so many different elements of the MMO genre that I really liked. It had a really enjoyable crafting system that was very accessible, that made a lot of sense. It had a really great community where people wanted to play together and help each other. It had amazing dungeons and really enjoyable boss fights. It had very comical NPCs that had a good humor and had good stories, had some very interesting and fun quests. It had great lore. The only thing I can say I didn't really like about WoW, even when I first played it, was I wasn't a fan of the art style. But the art style is what has let WoW stand the test of time. But the ability to add on to the macro system and to add add-ons into the game added some different variety. But when the game came out, and I was there in beta on Doomhammer back in 2003, I think it was, is when got invited to the beta by a person who was a GM in Lineage 2, by the way, and who worked at NCSoft. got me invited into the beta, and I started playing this game, and that was the end of my Lineage 2 experience. But I really just fell in love with this game. I played it from 2003 all the way until now. Over the past 4 years, I probably don't play the retail that much at all because I think the retail game is horrible. But the experience back then and the game as it was then was amazing. Being able to play a paladin or a hunter or a thief, a rogue, or a fighter or a mage or a warlock, all these classes were very unique. They all had their own kind of styles to them, and just the itemization. You can see here, even in this video, where I'm talking about how I was able to stack a lot of different types of items that gave me all kinds of heals. And you'll see in some of these encounters where I'm hitting a mob and I'm receiving like 4 or 5 different heals coming back to me, which is just shows you kind of the variety of gear. In fact, to this day, I don't know of an MMO that has more variety in the type of gear that you get just from level 0 to level 60. There's so much gear, so many different varieties and types of gear that you can find and that you can loot, and it gives you a really interesting flavor and variety. And there's so much itemization based on trinkets and on-use procs and on-use effects, and the crafting's really fun, and the boss fights are fun, and the dungeons are fun. I could go on, and the music was beautiful. The world was open world. There was some dangerous areas to it that were fun. There were little hidden surprises, hidden quests, hidden rares that could give you interesting, items. Just I could go on and on about WoW, but I think its success stands. Its success speaks for itself, and I really enjoyed the game, and to this day I still enjoy the game. And my YouTube channel, Caffeine Injected, is pretty much based off of me playing classic World of Warcraft, or really vanilla. I played vanilla World of Warcraft for years, and built up a little bit of a following there. And but yeah, definitely my number one. And I would like to say there's some honorable mentions to this list, games that didn't make the top 5. There's quite a few that I want to talk about that I think that are great. So I just like to throw a shout out to Rift, to Ion, great games that I played, Vindictus, C9, Neverwinter, and there's probably a few others. I hate to leave out some of these games because they're great games in their own right. What's some other ones? I guess that's pretty much the other ones that I would have mentioned. Dungeons and Dragons Online was pretty good, and yeah, but that's it for my top 5 list, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will catch you later.